world's a reflection. Aristotle in his Peripatetic Walks used to walk in nature and see whatever he saw in nature was a reflection of his own projection. And this is true. And I find this that whatever people judge in other people are usually telling me about who they are. When I was 18 years old, I had a desire to master my life. I also had a desire to study universal laws, natural laws of the universe, sometimes called. And I wanted to know, what are those? So I made a list of, at first I looked up universal laws, and it gave all kinds of eponymous laws, Newton's law of gravity, Coulomb's law, and all these types of things. And I said, I want to know what's the most universal of universal laws, and how does it apply to human behavior? That's what I wanted to know. And my topic right now is, what are those most important laws of human behavior, those universal laws? And that led me to studying many, many disciplines, 300 in fact, and trying to find the common thread to all of them. And I did find some common threads. And I found that these things were referenced by various writers through the ages. And so I'd like to share a few of those with you, because I do believe that they will give you an advantage in life. And there are things that I share in my Breakthrough Experience program and many of the other programs to try to give people a competitive advantage and comparative advantage in their life. So the first of these principles or laws, they go back even into the so-called Big Bang theory. At least that's the cosmological theory that is common today, the standard model, is the very beginning of the universe had perfect symmetry. For every particle, there was an antiparticle. For every positive and negative charge, they were balanced. Everything had a symmetry. They called it a perfect symmetry at the time. Today, we still have that in some respects. We have a conservation of charge, which is conservation law. We have symmetry laws that are still here today. And we find out, as a philosopher, Heraclitus, in around the 6th, 5th century BC, wrote, a unity of opposites. So the first principle is the unity of opposites. That means that there's always two sides to things, you might say. And I found this very powerful. I made a list of, I went through the Oxford Dictionary many years ago and I identified 4,628 individual traits found in the dictionary that a human being can display. And I found them like antonyms, pairs of opposites. Sometimes they were not exact opposite words, but they basically meant the opposite things. Nice, mean, kind, cruel, generous, stingy, these kind of things. Considered, inconsiderate. And sometimes we put the word un in front of it or a in front of it, but it's basically a pair of opposites. And Mark Penn found this also on the internet, these pairs of opposites. And this is one of the laws that are there. There's literally oppositions. And for every time you take a position, there's an opposition. There's even a law called in sociology called the law of heuristic escalation. When somebody promotes an idea, somebody promotes the opposite idea. And if you take all the values on the planet and put them in a blender, they cancel each other. Just like all the words, the synonyms and antonyms are just really a spectrum, a circle of similars and differences. One of the ancient laws of physics and of psychology and philosophy was the law of similars and differences, which is another name for these oppositions again. When you see somebody you're infatuated, you see things you're similar. When you see somebody you're resentful, you see things that are different. When you're infatuated with somebody, you tend to want to go towards the one. When you're resentful to somebody, you want to go away from them in the many. But these pairs of opposites are there. And you find out that whatever is promoted, somebody promotes the opposite. Pro-life, anti-life, pro-abortion. Inside your body, you have mitosis, cell growth and development, and you have apoptosis, cell death, birth and death. Anabolic, catabolic. You have reduction, oxidation, build and destroy. Even in the universe, there's building and destroying constantly going on. Every time a star is born, another star dies. And the galaxies are basically being recycled. In your body, you have the same thing. Cells are born and dying. The same number of cells that are birthing and dying in your body to maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis in your body is thousands of different feedback systems to bring things into balance, the pairs of opposites. In the study of philosophy, Zeno and other philosophers, Hegel and Plato, had what they call the dialectic: thesis, antithesis, synthesis, unity of opposites. So one of the first laws is that there's pairs of opposites. And they're actually not really separable. They're kind of entangled, quantum entangled, as they say in physics, between particle and nanoparticle. Paul Dirac, in his Principles of Quantum Mechanics in 1947, is the one that really put that and formalized that. But it's still a truth. And it was known in the time of Heraclitus 2,000 something years ago, way before quantum mechanics. So they knew that. Wet becomes dry, dry becomes wet. Even Empedocles in the 5th century back then talked about fire, air, and water and earth. Fire and water canceling each other, and air and earth canceling each other as opposites. Rarity and density, gravity and radiation. Gravity takes parts and brings them into oneness, and radiation takes from oneness and goes into parts and radii. These are pairs of opposites. So one of the most universal laws is pairs of opposites, and it's inside our psychology. In fact, the second you infatuate with a trait, you resent its opposite. And the second you resent a trait, you infatuate with the opposite. If you seek something, you fear the loss of it. And if you resent something and want to avoid something, you seek the gain of it. These are pairs of opposites that run all of human behavior. If you understand the laws of these pairs of opposites, as I explain in the Breakthrough Experience and I teach in the method that I teach, the DeMartini method, you get to see how profound they are and how useful they are to be able to understand human behavior. And it gives you comparative advantage because now you can predict things that you wouldn't normally see if you didn't know the laws that govern them. So the first law is the pairs of opposites, that every position creates an opposition. And everything you can label, the opposite is also available in awareness. And when you see one and you don't see the other at the same time, you have what is called a sequential contrast, and you basically have a social bias. And when you meet somebody and you see only their positive side, you don't see their negative side, you're blind. If you see their only negative side, don't see their positive side, you're blind. If you see both sides simultaneously, you'll feel love for them. But if you see one side without the other, you'll feel a judgment on them. And judgment is basically a separation of these opposites and an isolation and assuming there's one without the other, which makes us blind and fractionate ourselves instead of integrate and empower ourselves. So the oppositions, if you have the time to look, you'll see that there's always a pair of opposites. In fact, you can't even perceive without a contrast. If you go into a black room and it's totally black, you can't see. If you go into a totally white, snowy environment where up and down and everything else is all white, you can't see. But if you put a contrast, you can see. All of our senses must have contrast. And contrast are really the pairs of opposites. So if you understand that those pairs of opposites are always synchronous and they're always paired together, and all comparisons are byproducts of that comparison, that pair of opposites, then you realize that all your judgments are incomplete awarenesses. And when you love something and embrace both sides and see both sides, when you love somebody, you're going to see the pairs of opposites, the nice, the mean, the kind, the cruel, the positive, the negative, the considerate, the inconsiderate, the generous, the stingy. You're going to see that they're both at different times. You know, if somebody supports me, I can be nice as a pussycat. They challenge me, I can be mean as a tiger. I have both sides, both opposites. And that law of opposites inside every human being. So embracing both sides simultaneously is love, and trying to see one side without the other is judgment and strife. And then we're going to be infatuated with them or resenting them, and we're going to put them on a pedestal or put them in a pit, and we're not going to put them in a heart. So knowing the laws of how to find the simultaneity and the synchronicity of opposites is the key. That's why Zeno and others put the dialectic together, to make us as propositions, to make us see both sides simultaneously and synchronize it and synthesize it. And I define love as the synthesis and synchronicity of all complementary opposites, all pairs of opposites. So that's the first law. The second law is really a byproduct of that, because the laws of similarities and difference is the same as the law of the one to many. From the one comes the many, from the many come the one. From one point source, light radiates out into many radii, and gravity from the many radii goes to the one. So electromagnetism and gravity, two universal laws, one by Newton and Einstein, and someday quantum gravity, and also radiation by Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell. You basically have the four differential equations. On both sides are differential equations. They're basically the calculus of gravity and calculus of light. And they're all based on the law of the one to many. And now in our own psyche, the same thing occurs. When you're dating many people, you're looking for that special one. Once you got the one, your mind wanders about the many. And that's the oscillation between those two. And that's based on hedonic adaptation and mood swings and polarities of perception, which again, oppositions and the law of the one to many. And what's interesting is you tend to be attracted to people who have more people around them and repelled from people who have less people around them based on the law of the one to many. You're trying to integrate and not disintegrate. So the law of the one to many also runs it. And when you're elated and you see and you are infatuated with somebody, you see similarities which seem like we're all the same. In fact, when you're infatuated with somebody, you go, oh my God, we have the same number of eyes, same number of ribs, same number of arms and legs. We're soulmates. When you resent somebody, we go, we're going in two different directions. We don't see eye to eye. It's all about differences. So one, many, integration, disintegration, build, destroy, unify, diversity. These laws of one and many and the laws of pairs of opposites really overlap, and they can be almost seen as the same thing because they're really expressions of each other. And another law is a law of reflection. The law of reflection is that whatever you perceive in others, you have within yourself. Now, at first, when I first thought about that many years ago, 4 decades plus, I started to think, well, do I have everything I see in other people? And instead of me waiting for me to react to people and then go and find out where I do it, and I found I did, I just went to the Oxford Dictionary and went through 4,628 individual traits I found there and looked at where I had all the traits. And I found out that whatever I see in other people, I have. There's an old statement in the New Testament, Romans 2:1, that says, what you see in others and what you judge in others, beware, because you do the same thing. I found that extremely truthful. In my Breakthrough Experience program, I've proven that on about 125,000 people personally. So whatever you see in others, you have, and there is a reflection. The world is a reflection. Aristotle, in his peripatetic walks, used to walk in nature and see whatever he saw in nature was a reflection of his own projection. And this is true. And I find this, that whatever people judge in other people are usually telling me about who they are. And you find that. I learned that when I was in professional school. And this one guy who was a teacher, he ended up being very cautious about people cheating on tests. And I thought, this guy's fanatical about cheating. And I don't think everybody's cheating in this room, but he's really freaked out about it. But we found out that when he got out in his own world, in his own practice, that he was caught cheating. And he was projecting his own fears and anxieties of himself. And what's interesting is whatever you resent in other people, it reminds you of what you're ashamed of in yourself. Whatever you admire in other people, it reminds you of what you actually look up to in yourself, that you're proud of in yourself. And when you realize that when your judgment of other people are revealing to you what you're actually holding inside yourself, but are too proud or too humble to admit it. So reflective awareness is a great law. And reflection is basically a law. You know, even if we look at electromagnetism or gravity, there's waves, and waves have reflection, and they bounce off things, right? And so what we do is we have reflective awareness. Whatever we send out to people, as it goes out, it's kind of like a radiation. As it comes in, it's like a gravitation. And so we can see the same laws of the pairs of opposites, because whatever we see in others, we also have the opposite. We found out that we infatuate with people and we resent the opposite. We got both of those inside us. So the law of pairs of opposites, the law of one and many, because we seek or avoid. When we seek, it's one, and we avoid, we tend to go to many, fragment and separate, unify and divide. And then we also have the law of reflection. So they're really reflections of each other. So all three of these, and there's other universal laws, but those are three that are very powerful laws on how to understand life and human behavior. Because whatever you see in others is you. And you have both the one and the many, the one part. In fact, when you look at your life and find out where do you do what you see in others, you'll find it's either one big time it's equal or many little times it adds up, quantitatively, qualitatively. The ancient Greek philosophers used to say there's quantity and quality, degree and kind, multitude and magnitude, which is actually a pairs of opposites that based on the law of the one and many and reflection. So I just wanted to share a few moments on that. In my Breakthrough Experience program, I actually take you through an exercise called the DeMartini Method, where you get to see all three of those laws and others applied. Now, when you're done, you get to integrate yourself, you get to empower yourself. Instead of judging and weighing yourself down with emotional baggage and being distracted by impulses and instincts of your subcortical, you might say subconscious mind, you get to be inspired, you get to self-actualize, you get to move in the direction of what inspires you. You give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, radiate, not gravitate only, and you get to power your life. So I tell people if they learn the laws of the universe, see what's interesting is the laws of the universe are unviolatable. The laws of human beings are violatable. We go around with moral hypocrisies and all the moral laws that we try to live by. Very seldom do we actually live them 100%. And what's interesting, and even Alistair McIntyre in his book on the history of ethics, show that we basically set up all these artificial laws based on wounds that we don't own about ourselves, and then we go around and project those onto other people, and then moral hypocrites in our nature, in our nature, and we try to live by laws that we made up in our mind that aren't based on universal laws. I've been studying universal laws for 52 years now, and I'm certain that those are the ones you want to fill your mind with. If you follow those guidelines, you don't err. You're in track. But if you try to go in based on temporary moral hypocrisies of a local climb that vary as you go around the world, you realize that these are things that you're going to be trying but not live by. And I'm interested in the things that stand the test of time. That's why I took a moment to talk about what are the primary universal laws. But the three that I just mentioned was a law of polarity and pairs of opposites. There's a conservation that keeps those in balance. Charge parity, if you talk about positive and negative. And you'll find it even in the hedonic adaptation in the brain. You'll find out that if you go above equilibrium, things bring you down. If you go below equilibrium, things bring you up, brings you back into balance. The balance of opposites, the unity of opposites, as Heraclitus says. Then there's a law of the one to many, and then there's a law of reflection. Whatever we perceive in the world around us is a reflection of who we are inside us. When we can honor that and respect that and understand those laws and see how they apply, as I explained in the breakthrough experience, we have a comparative advantage in the world and allows us to master our life instead of being running around with a chicken with its head cut off, trying to be something we're not, trying to get rid of something we can't, instead of honoring all aspects of our nature. So if you're ready to do that, come to the breakthrough experience so I can share with you the insights that allow you to have the laws of the universe, ones you can live by that'll stand the test of time. So you can stand the test of time and do something amazing in this world. Give yourself permission to shine and give yourself permission to create the difference and the legacy you want to leave on the planet.